Welcome to Redefining Normal. Join us as we question conventional thinking and talk about the courage it takes to create and live a deliciously vibrant life.
This podcast is for people who know there's a better way to do life and love, how we show up in connection to others, our kids, our partners, our business, and beyond that, our relationship with money, vitality, and more than anything, ourselves.
We're two shamelessly unapologetic moms choosing to experience the fullness of life.
And we're collapsing the conditioning that says you can't live a life of pleasure, peace, and abundance in the midst of the mundane of life responsibilities, work, and kids.
Thank you for listening in. Let's do this. Hello, and today on Redefining Normal, we are talking about embracing the suck. I'm super excited to have this conversation with you today, Miss Jamie. Can you start us off with talking about what do we mean when we're talking about embracing the suck?
What are we talking about? We are talking about the discomfort of the in-between, right? Like the parts of life that don't just go the way we want it to, that cause tension or frustration or whatever negative story we have around an experience that we might be having. And the thing about it is that is part of the human experience. It is a what is. And so when we can learn to be with it, navigate it intentionally, and understand what it is, it really gives us an upper hand in figuring out how to make the most of it and how to move through it.
I love that. So for me, when you say that, like some examples that come up are things like, we were saying this before getting on the show, heartbreak, right? Like we talked last week a little bit about opening heart and heartbreak, right? So sometimes we don't want to walk into a relationship because we're afraid that it will end. Well, then you'll stop yourself from actually living your life because you're afraid of the ending. And so even in the endings of, and I wouldn't even say endings because it's just a shift of the relationship, right? Even if it's an energetic connection, like all of my, a lot of the men that I've been with in my life, like they're still like, if I've loved them, I still love them at some capacity, right? And so it's that embracing the suck. Well, when things shift, that kind of sucks sometimes. So how can we be in that space of the suck of that? Or how can we be in the space when, let's be real, if you've been in business or in life, money can go up and down. Right. And in those down moments when shit's hard, and I know I've been here, you've been here, when we're like, how is this going to happen? How am I going to hit my bills? How am I going to get the things done that I want to get done? It can really feel sucky.
Yeah.
And so how can we embrace those moments? Because in those moments, and I even look at this like, I don't know somebody who has hit 7-8 figure businesses and beyond, or has that amount of money without having moments where they've had nothing.
No, because the suck is where we learn. Like, you have to encounter challenges in order to grow and evolve. Like that's it. That's the way that we understand, because if everything is flowing wonderfully, we have no feedback. We have nothing that needs to change. And to me, that's what this human experience is all about, is understanding, learning, expanding, like, if you just stay the same the whole time, what is this about, And so we have to encounter challenges in order to gain new data to like, this thing didn't happen the way I wanted it to. So what do I do now in order to get me closer to the thing I want? And I think there's this awareness that there's an underlying, and I really don't know, actually, like if it's in our nature, like in our nervous system, if we've been conditioned, because I do feel like there are cultures that do this well, but like, I feel like there's this underlying, like, just move away from anything uncomfortable, and that isn't in service to our highest and best. And so even just being aware that that's there, that like, there's this unconscious, like, just move away from. And I know that that's innate, like to our nervous system, a protection mechanism. I also think culturally, there's just like avoid the uncomfortable versus like this conversation around change the story about what the uncomfortable is in order to utilize it.
It's interesting because when you say that, the thing that's coming to me is the feeling of the fear of failure. Right. And so it's like so many people don't go into their dreams, don't try. Like, don't go open. How many people have not dated in however long because they're afraid their heart's going to break? Right. How many people haven't started their business because they're afraid that's not going to work? Or if they put themselves out there, someone's going to come and tell them they're shitty or whatever the thing is. By the way, if you put
I've done it 100 times,
right? Like, I'm going to tell you, if you're a messenger in the world and you're here with a voice and you're putting yourself out there, somebody's going to tell you they don't like it some point in time. So get over that shit. Right. And so how many people don't do the thing because they're afraid of the sucky part of the thing? Well, the sucky part's going to happen. So what you have to like do, and I think this is really like probably actually before that, I want to say the other piece that I was talking about prior to this is even things like another example is impatience, right? It's like that middle part where things get messy. To me, like can be real. It can feel real sucky, right? Because like things are messy. You don't know where you are. It's like the void place, right? Where you're like, I know I want this thing out here. I'm sitting here. I want it now. It's not here yet. Right. Yeah. And in that place, it's really interesting because I remember a couple of years ago, I really started to pay attention to this. And as somebody who's dealt with anxiety my whole life, I could really start to feel in that place. So if you like feel this in your body, if you guys are listening, I mean, I know you're listening when you're listening, that there's this place where when it's out in front of you and you don't have it yet, it is a tension. And so it can feel like anxiety, right? It can feel like anxiety in our bodies, and that can feel really freaking uncomfortable in your body. And so it's like, how can we, in that place of impatience of, I want that thing now, but it's not here yet, right? That can feel real sucky. So how can we learn in these places where, whether it's in our relationships and uncomfortable conversations that we have to have, that we get to have, right? But knowing that when we have those uncomfortable conversations, thank goodness, because on the other side of it, there's like another depth of intimacy and love and connection. And all of these things we've talked about. And so how can we move from there? Like, why is it so important to actually embrace this?
Yeah. Well, and I'm learning right now about the law of three, that there is always like a desiring force, a negating force, and a neutralizing force. And so I don't know a lot about it yet, but the concept is that if there is something I want, that there is then innately and naturally the opposite and equal force of no to that. And so I'm learning to reframe and utilizing this awareness that when I'm feeling that tension, it's because I'm holding the opposite point of it. And so I actually have started to interpret it as encouragement, because it's like, whoa, feel how challenging, how sucky this feels right now, because I'm holding the opposite and equal desire. And so utilizing this like reflective, like we talked about in some of our first episodes of like, like mirror work and, self-reflection is like, what is this showing me? I mean, like the what is, right? Like whatever event is happening, and we get to tell and create the story around it in order to experience the way we want to. So it used to be like, oh, this thing is happening and it's negating what I want. But now I'm starting to recognize it is showing me how close I am to the thing I want, right? Like it's the same exact external event. I'm interpreting it different. And so there's this underlying kind of universal law of awareness of like polarity and energy. But it's also important because if we cannot embrace the suck, if we cannot recognize that it is a part of life, we collapse, we give up, we numb out, we never achieve and actualize the thing that our soul is here to do, right? Like we are not here to be numb and just robot our way through life. But that's what happens if you encounter what we're calling the suck and don't know how to be with it and how to navigate through it.
Yeah, I love that. And I think ultimately when we avoid it, then we're avoiding our dreams.
Yeah.
Like we have to learn how to have this. And like I said, as somebody who has spent a lifetime living in anxiety, it's really interesting to allow our bodies to speak to us and actually let this pay attention. Like, because when we can actually embrace it, I know even in the conversation we had last week, like I had so much peace in the uncomfortable.
Right.
Like my body can find peace. Like when you start to actually embrace what this is and just be like, it's part of life, and to notice like, hey, this is just what's happening. And how do I get to handle my body? How do I get to be in my body? How do I get to create safety in my own body? Because we come back to that first episode, awareness, right? We bring that awareness in. Then we know like, it's just a part of it.
Yeah.
You know, like, and I say this because a lot of the people who are listening, I know, are people who want to have a message out in the world, or who do have a message out in the world. Yeah. And having been somebody who's been doing this for 20, 15, 18 years, a long time, right? There are times where you're going to put yourself out there that's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Like whether it's in a relationship, whether it's online, whether it's going and hitting bigger goals that you have, or expanding your financial reach to be like, I want to go and do this holiday, which expands me outside of what's comfortable. It's going to feel uncomfortable in your body. And so once you can actually start to differentiate how that feels in your body to be in these moments, because you have awareness, you can go, yeah, that's this thing. This is me in this voidy, uncomfortable, sucky moment. Can I be here? Can I be in it? And this is why it's so important, because then you can start to recognize, oh, I'm okay.
Yeah.
I'm okay here.
Yeah.
Right. And then we can bring that presence. Like, this is how do we be in it? We bring this presence. I think presence comes back to all of this, and you can come back to presence. And I think this is also the piece where, like, even if I was talking about before, this disconnect between where it's forward and where we are now. Yeah, I can put it out there into the world and say, this is what I want. But in order to not feel sucky about it, to not feel impatient about it, to not feel anxious about it, it's out there. Now, come back into this moment. Be present in your body, find peace in your body, live, take the next step. You don't have to worry about the 100 steps ahead of you. Yeah. Because if you start to worry about the 100 steps ahead of you, you'll get anxious and you won't do it.
It's like, come back to right now. What is
come
real
back to right now?
Right now. Yeah. Because the anxiety really is like being in the future that hasn't happened yet, and reacting to some potential what if, but it's only a potential. It isn't happening right now, and it doesn't exist in the current moment. I would even say, and I know that this is going to be a stretch for people that don't even know how to like not collapse or move away from the suck. But I would even say that as you learn to embrace it and to recognize what it is, that you can even find pleasure in it, like that you can smile in it and like relax into the discomfort, because you know what it holds, you know the gift in it. But that takes practice, but it is there. It is on that spectrum of experiencing challenges, discomfort, and like in general, whatever it is that the suck means for you, you know?
Right. It's interesting because a couple of years ago in my human design, I discovered that I have the 51 shock line as a messenger. And we have learned, Jamie and I have learned over the last few years as we watched my life unfold, the shock line means that things come to me in shocking ways. And ultimately, I've had to learn, this has been part of my journey, is that when things shock me, then, and this, by the way, when we talk about human design stuff, we all exist, like we all have all of this. It's just that for me, this is how I learn this way and how I deliver a message this way. And when I started to learn this, I was like, oh, if I don't surrender to the fact that things are going to shock the hell out of me, then I'm going to be unbalanced and totally in a turbulent life, creating absolute drama and mess, which is where my life had been, people, for a really long time. And I went, yeah, that's not what I want. But it doesn't also mean that just shock now ends. Shock is now just like, now I say things to her and I'm like, it's funny. Like oftentimes I will now like, there will be a shocking thing that happens and I can look at it and go, you won't believe.
Can't wait to see what this one holds.
And it's true, right? Like I will often come to you laughing.
Yeah.
Like, this one's funny. Right. And so it's the way that I embrace it is like, I could look at it and go, oh my God, this shocking thing happened again and my whole life is going to fall apart. Or I can look at it and go, okay, well, that's an interesting thing that I'm going to get to deal with now.
Right.
And how am I going to deal with that? And what's this thing going to hold for me? And truly, I think that all of these things, anytime we have a shock, anytime we have a heartbreak, anytime we have things that don't necessarily go the way we do, it catalyzes us into our better. Right. Yeah. And so now sometimes when I'm in those moments that I'm like, oh my God, I don't know, like it's like layering on top of me. And there are days that people like it layers on top of me. And I'm like, holy cow, I think what I just dealt with in one day is what somebody would deal with in like a year. Right. And no joke, like it can happen that way. And I look at it and I go, now I'm like, oh, what's happening tomorrow? Because something real good's going to happen tomorrow. If I can actually embody this and embrace this and be in this, right? Because that's what it is. It's like, I don't avoid it because it's going to bring up feelings, right? You're going to feel stuff. And even if you can't mentally say, I feel angry, I feel whatever, in your body, you're going to have feelings. And if you can learn, and I think this is a really important thing around how we be in the suck. And this is something I've really had to practice. If I can learn not to put a story to it and not let my mind get all wrapped up in it and keep myself trapped in the looping thoughts of, oh, this is so terrible and he this and she that and I can't figure this out and blah, 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 blah. And I get all mental about it, then I could stay trapped there. And I have for a lifetime, I stayed trapped there for months. Yeah. That's the reality, right? Yeah. Now, and Jamie's watched me do it. Now I go, okay, well, that happened. I feel this. I'm going to go feel it. And it might take me a half an hour. It might take me 2 hours. It might take me an entire day. Usually this day, not really anymore. It's usually only like a couple hours for me now.
And I want to say too, Carrie, that like we have a story and the people around you will have a story. I mean, like, I can feel I've even done it in your dating, like that thing he's doing it could mean this, and so you also have people around you confirming the potential scary story, right? Like, but it's still all story. It's all stories. Then you don't know unless you have a conversation or you reach the end. If it's not with another person, if it's an event, you don't know what it means. So notice
letting go of the story, right? Paying attention to that story in your mind. And then if you can actually just say, okay, story, I now hear you. I've now honored and acknowledged that there's a story that's happening in my mind, and kind of just tell that voice, thank you. And then come into your body and just feel it. Like if you can actually feel it and touch it and move that energy, magic sits on the other side of it. Because really what we are doing is releasing trapped energy into our body, which again, what I'm saying is it's the catalyst, right? So then you've removed this energy that's trapped in your body, your field, your mental, emotional, spiritual, energetic field. And once that's gone, it's gone. Like it's gone, people. And then on the other side of it, generally speaking, what I find is there is magic that happens. But if we stay stuck in it, which I have for sure done in the past for months on end, then I just stay stuck in it for months and no magic happens in that.
Yeah. I think too, it's important to recognize it doesn't always come by way of shock. It can be like,
yes, it's true.
Yeah.
For the other people in the world.
It can be like an underwhelming sort of energy. But notice when, you're like trying to avoid discomfort in life. Like, I got to do this thing. This is going to suck. Whatever. Or something happens that sucked. Like, notice where you're putting a negative spin on the experiences that are happening around you, because you are the author. You literally get to determine. And I have my brother-in-law who does not understand. We do not speak the same language. And he used to always say, Jamie, you do not live in touch with reality. And I'm like, it's real for me. I'm really experiencing these things. And if I get to define my reality, why would I define one that sucks? Why would I define one that's disempowered and challenging and, negative? You have that reality if that's what works for you. But this is mine. I'm going to create it the way I want to. And all of you listening, your reality is the way you interpret the things that are happening around you.
Absolutely.
That's it. So stop. There is no reality that you have to accommodate except for the actions that are happening. But how you interpret them is entirely in your power and your authority. Totally.
And there's also something you said too that I'd like to expand on. You said with embracing the suck, I was even thinking about times when I hear people say to me, again, you guys, I've been doing this for a long time. And when I hear people say to me, I don't want to go and do the email. I don't want to go and put myself out there. I don't want to blah, 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 blah. That's going to suck to have to do that. And we're only supposed to do the things that are really light us up. And I want to say bullshit. Because sometimes, and I'm going to say this as somebody who also says, yes, do the things that light you up and live a life of pleasure. And sometimes that's going to mean you got to stay up and you have a launch to hit and it's 10 o'clock at night and everybody, or it's 8 o'clock at night and your family's going out and they're going to have a party and you're like, fuck, I have a goal and I have a launch to hit. And so you know what? On this day today, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to write the emails and I'm going to get them out and it's going to suck because I'm going to miss this thing, but so be it. I have missed many things from my family for this purpose. Right. And sometimes that sucks. And sometimes I have to look at my kids and go, sorry, guys, I'm going to miss this thing because I have to go. And sometimes it's not sucky. Sometimes it's I get to go and be on stage and be in a really cool place. But the suck comes because I missed something else. That I wanted to be at. Right. And there's always a choice in this. And sometimes we have to embrace that part of it. And you have to like choose, do you want the end goal? Or are you going to sit here and say to yourself, well, that thing is a little bit hard, so I'm not going to figure it out and I'm not going to do it. I'm going to give up.
Well, and this is where we have to be really honest with ourselves, right? Is like, am I in avoidance or is this really not for me? And then also focusing on immediate pleasure versus the long-term pleasure, feel good, whatever it is that you are dedicated to creating, because our minds can convince us all day long that, oh, this isn't for me. And if you're not being really brutally honest with yourself, you'll believe that shit, right? Like you have to be able to also call yourself out and be like, that's avoidance. You are avoiding a little hard work because it's uncomfortable in this moment, but you know it's what you need in order to achieve the bigger thing you want. And you're never going to get that bigger thing if you're going to avoid all these little moments of discomfort. 100%. It just is it's the way it is. There's no way around that.
It's the way it is. And sometimes, peeps, it's really funny because I always think people are like, I'm going to go into the online space and it's going to be easier and I got to get out of job. And I'm like, holy moly, sometimes the job would be easier, people. Depends on where you're at, right? Don't actually think that just because you're coming into the space that all of a sudden like angels and fairies are going to hand you everything on a silver platter. Like you actually have to do the work.
It is a lot of work. It's different work. And a different boss, but you choose, like how you want to navigate that. But yeah, there's work involved. Like you got to work in order to achieve. And even that like work, right? Like I love my work. If I had $1 million in the bank right now, I would still be doing exactly what I'm doing. It would probably be easier. It would probably be a little more fun. It would, like the dynamics might be a little different, but I would still be doing it. So even this idea of work, like notice if that has a negative connotation in your mind or a positive one. Because again, that's your story. You get to define that, right? Like I love my work, even when it is staying up at 10 o'clock and writing freaking emails or something, like it's just a part of the puzzle.
Part of the job.
Got to do it.
Okay. So let's wrap this because we're trying to keep these. You guys are trying to keep them. We're trying to keep
we can
short,
just
sweet,
talk
to the
and
point. So if we are in the suck, and I was saying before, like I wanted to bring into the conversation, like sometimes, again, somebody who's dealt with mental health, like sometimes it could drag on for months. But as I've said, I've learned like I can move through this pretty quickly now. Right. So how do we embrace the suck and not let it control us? And like we can still be in it, but also I would even say just live life while we're in the midst of the suck. How do we also not stay stuck in the suck? That was a lot of challenging words. Yes. How do we not stay stuck in the suck while we also embrace the suck?
Yeah. I think that, this is what we were talking about earlier is this act of acceptance, and acceptance is not settling. It is recognizing what is and not trying to change it, and it's like when we come into this place of acceptance, like this is what is, then we have an honest way of navigating it. Whereas when we're avoiding it, and also just to point out, avoidance does not get rid of things. When we avoid, that thing stays there and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger until you have to deal with it. So even in the grand scheme of things, addressing it, looking towards it, being in acceptance, whatever, like embracing it, helps you overcome, move through, change, whatever it is faster. And it almost feels paradoxical, right? Like I'm going to accept it in order to change it, but that doesn't like those two things feel like opposites. So we have to accept what is, like we have to be able to be honest. And we also have to recognize that there's no way around it. I mean, like it is a part of life. It is part of this human experience in a nervous system body. And the struggle comes when we're trying to get away from it versus like, this is where I'm at in the process right now. And I actually don't need to resist it. I can allow it to show me what's going on. And in that acceptance, in that like not trying to push against it is actually what allows us to move out of it. Yes. It feels so paradoxical. It's like, no, that doesn't make sense to the mind because it isn't a mental thing. It is an embodiment thing. And so like, I think that watching your stories too, because it's really easy to be like, oh, my life sucks. This is just where I'm at. That's a story too, right? Like I continually ask, what story am I telling right now that this is how I'm experiencing, interpreting this situation?
So good. I have two things to add from what you said. Everything you said is awesome. And one of the things is I was watching, someone sent me a video the other day, a reel the other day, and I just loved the simplicity of it. It's like, once you bring awareness to the problem or to a event that's been happening that feels like, or like a block, let's call it a block in your system, right? The awareness can be enough to let it go, to not have it be a problem anymore. Like, oh, yeah, now I get it. Now either it's a choice, it becomes a choice, right? So you have the awareness and you're like, oh, this thing is here. I can choose to stay stuck in it and loop on it. And like, this is literally what I'd have to say in my mind, you guys. Like I had to retrain my mind. Yeah. I can choose to hear these thoughts and let them loop all day long, every day. Yeah. And I can remember asking Jamie, you guys, at some point, I can ask many friends at some point, I'm like, how do you make it end? How do I make this looping thing end in my mind? They're like, stop it, Carrie. And I'm like, the amount of times I wanted to spit at people who said, stop it, Carrie.
Yeah. But I can't do that. That's not how it works.
Stop it.
And it's like,
eventually it is.
It's like uncomfortable and it is hard. Yeah.
Right. Eventually it is that you just stop. Like you just start to be like redirecting your thoughts into other things. And it might feel uncomfortable at first. It might feel like you've been lying to yourself at first. Yeah. Right. But still redirect them. Still just pay attention and you can redirect and make a new choice. And in those moments, make a new choice. Do I want to stay here or do I want to, what would be the better thing for me? Is it to go for a walk? Is it to eat this healthy food? Is it to go and do the thing that I've been avoiding? Because once you go do the thing you're avoiding, it's gone. Right.
Yes. Yes.
And the other thing I wanted to add here is one of my favorite like things to say is pay attention or pay with pain. Right? Because, and I loved how you said it, like it just keeps building, building, building. So whether it's like, if you don't pay attention and there's this little niggle in your body, then you don't pay attention. Then all of a sudden it's a big niggle and it's a big problem. And then all of a sudden you're the doctor and then there's bills to pay. And then there's all the things. Right? Yep. If you don't pay attention to your money stuff, and God, we've all done this one, didn't pay the bill. And then all of a sudden there's fees to pay because you didn't pay the bill. And then there's the next thing. And then there's the next thing. And all of a sudden $100 bill becomes a $500 bill. Yep. Right. Pay attention or pay with pain. And so if you're not paying attention to the things, there will be a painful consequence. Yeah. Usually. Right. And it just gets bigger. Yeah. And so, or like, if you don't have the conversation with your partner, your spouse, your friend, whatever, your boss, your wherever it is. Yeah. And you just hold it in and you people please. And you're like, oh, it's all going to be fine. It's just going to work itself out. I'll just be a little mouse over here in a corner. No, it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And you get more resentful. And eventually you get divorced. Yeah. Yeah. Right. And that
quit your job or you end up with some physical embodiment of it. Right. Yeah. I mean, like it's true. Yeah. And it's not easy. I think that this idea of like, you just change it sounds like it's easy. It is one of the hardest things to do, to recognize that you are looping in your own mental story and choose to change it. Like it's really uncomfortable, but I challenge you to try it, to notice what comes up. Like you said, you may feel like you're lying to yourself because the whole world has told you that's not reality. You don't just get to make things up. 100% you do. Right. You do get to do that. It is uncomfortable. And on the other side, it is liberating. So liberating.
I will say, just sitting here in this moment, and honoring what you've just said, like it is micro moments, and it was micro moments for the last years that I could see these moments. But honestly, everybody, it's taken me years. Like, I'm not going to sit here and pretend to say to you that like overnight my mind changed and I changed mental health issues that were like debilitating me for years. It's taken me years of work to do this. But what I can officially say now and truly say is that the video that I was playing in my mind, whilst I have created amazing success in my life and had so many abundant, wonderful things happen to me, I also had these horrid mental health problems that kept me miserable and trapped into a marriage that was really unhealthy and unhappy. And I now look at the movie of my life, and it's fucking magical. Every day something magical happens, and love is here and abundance is here. And like, I literally feel like I'm not on the same timeline. I can't even think some of those thoughts anymore. And Jamie and I've been having conversations recently, and like, Jamie, I can remember that like that would have happened in the past, but it's not in my, like, I can't even bring it into my mind anymore.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to say this to you like it happened like that, because it didn't, but it was persistence with the knowing of like, you know what, there's other people in the world who are not in the same problems that I am, who don't have the same mental health issues that I do, who aren't looping in these things, that don't have the same inner experience that I was having. So I'm like, if it can happen for them, it can happen for me. Right. And I just kept having faith. And in those little micro moments where you might lie to yourself and say to yourself, I don't really believe this, eventually you'll start to believe it. And eventually the world will show you a mirror in the mirror work that you're like, oh, yes. And it might only last for a day that time.
Yeah.
Right. But then you celebrate that day. And then the next time it's like a whole week of like these magical miracles and your mind is in a better place. Yes. Celebrate those moments. And maybe only for right now, it's 3 minutes. Right. But it's these micro moments that you keep paying attention to, that you go, yes, if I can have it here, I can have it for 3 minutes. I can have it for 5 minutes. I can have it for a day. I can have it for a week. And I've literally been, 2 weeks now without feeling like I'm going to have a panic attack or anxiety. Maybe even 3 now. No, maybe 2. But like, it's an extended period of time.
Like, there's an awareness that it's there, but you get to choose how you interface with it. Right. Like it's empowering.
It's a really empowering experience. Yeah. And so, but it starts with these micro moments, and it starts with making new choices that you're going to start to pay attention to what's happening or continue to pay with pain.
I love it.
Anything else you want to say, or do we get to wrap that here?
No, I think we can wrap that because we have lots of conversations to have. There's more to say, but we'll say them in other conversations.
All right. Well, thanks for listening, guys.
If you enjoyed this show, let us know. We're all about authentic connection, so come chat with us on social media or email. Links are listed in the show notes.
And please make sure to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform and share the magic on your socials.